How's everyone doing? Welcome to Manchester. Really pleased to be with you here today at Ignite's UK Breakout here in Manchester. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm from the northwest of England, so being in Manchester today makes today ever so more special. What I'm here to talk to you about is innovation, and more specifically, Metaverse. And today's keynote is all about that redefining innovation, and it's impossible to go deep into that topic without talking about that buzzword, which is, of course, Metaverse. The first myth to break with Metaverse is that it does not mean VR. Metaverse does not mean virtual reality. It's not a new word for a single existing technology, but rather a convergence of many, one that is enabling new capabilities across various devices and all connected by the power of the cloud. And when it comes to Metaverse, we're seeing added value across consumer, commercial, and industrial scenarios. So let's take consumer to start. It's really all about driving immersive and social experiences through 3D immersive games like Minecraft, in retail scenarios with virtual shopping experiences, or even live concert events. The enterprise or commercial Metaverse really focuses on communication or collaboration between people in a work environment. As you've seen in the keynote from Satya and in his joint announcement with Mark Zuckerberg, we're bringing enterprise and commercial Metaverse capabilities to our existing platforms. One example of that is Mesh for Microsoft Teams. Being able to represent ourselves digitally opens new doors and unlocks new capabilities, like bringing ourselves into 3D digital meeting spaces. In my breakout at Envision earlier this year, we explored the concepts of avatars and the future of this technology in holoportation, providing a glimpse of the future. And as we delve deeper into this digital 3D world, representation will become more and more relevant. This is a journey that begins with curated avatars, as we're seeing in Mesh for Teams, but ultimately leads to transmitting our true likeness through holoportation. But what I wanted to really zero in on today was this concept of an industrial metaverse, unifying digital and physical locations through IoT, AI, digital twins, and machine learning. By leveraging this new platform layer, organizations are already fundamentally changing how they design, build, and operate their products and infrastructure. And it's not just about the product lifecycle, it's also about analyzing the factory where it's made, the supply chain logistics, and their effect on the planet. If you caught Judson's session last night, you'll have seen how customers such as Equinor are already using these technologies today for their nearshore wind farms. By simulating and predicting the real world, Equinor can better understand the effects of their infrastructure on local ecosystems. I hope through today's session we can demystify some of the hype behind the term metaverse and help you better understand this technology powering a transformational change. And I figure the best way to do this is to have a conversation with a good friend of mine. So welcome on stage, Greg Demchak from Bentley Systems.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
So Greg, thank you so much for being here today. I know you were actually supposed to be in Germany, but I've actually canceled that trip to be here, so really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you for having me, Alex. Definitely appreciate it.
Awesome. So, I know Bentley Systems really well. We've been working together for a while. Obviously, world-class leader in the BIM and 3D content kind of world. Maybe you could tell us, for the audience's benefit, a bit more about Bentley Systems and also the innovation lab that you lead.
Absolutely. So Bentley Systems, the company I work for, not to be confused with the Bentley car company, we actually provide software and solutions for engineers, contractors, builders responsible for building, constructing, operating, and designing critical infrastructure all over the world. And as you can kind of see in this video, these are examples from what our customers actually produce with our software. And it ranges anything from bridges, highways, offshore wind farms, electrical power systems, buildings, airports, all of that, all of the physical tissue that surrounds us and sort of enables like daily life. And then the innovation lab, within Bentley Systems, I run an innovation lab, and our remit is to look at what is the impact of new technology in the context of all this 3D modeling that's happening by these engineers, architects, and owners. And so obviously the subject that we're exploring with our users is the metaverse. What does that mean for this context, for these industrial use cases.
Absolutely. Super interesting. And you know, my initial kind of conversation on stage was very buzzwordy, right? I said metaverse about 10, 15 times. We talked about digital twins. We're on stage, so we're probably going to talk about BIM and 3D. Maybe we can demystify some of those words on stage today. So a digital twin, right? What is the requirement to consider something a digital twin? I mean, for me, it's all about the data. I'm interested to get your kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think even before we get to digital twin, like the examples you've seen, a lot of our customers are doing 3D modeling. So using building information modeling, it's a 3D model, but it's a static model. And I think a big differentiator between BIM, 3D modeling, and a digital twin is a digital twin is a live, continuously updated version of reality, not a static snapshot from a 3D model. So, in fact, I even think that a digital twin doesn't require, in fact, a 3D model.
For sure.
I think about if you're running the Deliveroo app, for example, on your phone, and you see where's the actual position of that rider, the status of my food. That's kind of like for me, that's like a tangible example of a digital twin. And it doesn't require a 3D model.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key. It's that dynamic connection between the real world and the digital world that's enabled by data. And having a 3D model actually is not necessarily a baseline requirement to call something a digital twin, which is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. You know, and on that concept, you know, we've talked about metaverse. I guess the flip side of that is it's very hard to imagine a metaverse scenario that doesn't include 3D, right? That seems to be a requirement, I would expect.
Exactly. So I think this is an interesting conversation emerging in the market. So I think the digital twin, I think BIM, okay, digital twin doesn't need BIM, but digital twin might be a requirement for the metaverse, but then it kind of brings back the 3D aspect of it. Because I think it's hard to imagine a metaverse experience that's not spatial and having a three-dimensional aspect to it. Whereas I think with the digital twin, you can kind of get away with not having an immersive interaction.
This is an interesting point as well. When we talk about metaverse, we definitely said that spatial 3D, definitely a kind of a core requirement. We talk about digital twin, having a dynamic connection to the real world, definitely a requirement. You know, interested to get your kind of personal thoughts on whether a metaverse experience requires a VR headset or a HoloLens or something like that. You know, interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you can kind of see in this video, this is some examples from some of our actual customer models. And we've actually been testing the whole range, everything from Oculus, full VR immersion, HoloLens, mixed reality immersion, and also just projecting the content onto large format 3D screens. And we're finding that it doesn't really matter whether well, it definitely matters at some level with the full immersion, but to have the three-dimensional experience is the core requirement.
I think that's it. It's multi-device support is key, right? So metaverse experiences occur across multiple devices. So we're not limiting a metaverse experience to say you need a HoloLens or you need an Oculus or a Meta Quest. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's just another way to interact with the data. It's not a baseline requirement, which I think is quite an interesting thing, and actually maybe something that people wouldn't have necessarily thought when they walked into it.
Right.
So obviously we talked a little bit about the technology. Maybe we could talk about a customer example. ITER, I know, is a massive infrastructure project, nuclear reactor in France. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that project and maybe Bentley's involvement.
Absolutely. So here we are actually on site. If people aren't familiar with this project, it's called ITER. It's an experimental fusion reactor being built in France right now. It's like the largest fusion reactor on the planet. The intent of this project, by the way, is to create the conditions of the sun here on Earth, which is a bit crazy.
Sounds scary.
Yeah, it's a bit scary. Like inside this tokamak reactor, it will be as hot as the sun, and the magnets will be like one of the coldest things in the universe. But obviously, if they develop this, the vision of this project is actually deliver zero carbon, unlimited energy for the planet, which would change everything. But that's the project. And the challenge here was how do you get these large-scale engineering-grade 3D models coming from, in this case, CATIA, into a immersive experience with as little barrier to entry as possible.
For sure.
And so there's such a huge investment already in 3D modeling. They're kind of already in on 3D. They've made that investment. The question is, does the metaverse allow the experience, sort of the value of that 3D content to go even further? And that's what we've been exploring with this client and with this use case.
And what's really interesting is, if we center on the value the customer's getting. I've come from a automotive OEM background. I know the pipeline between the real CAD of the car, for example, in that use case, and getting that content into a HoloLens or into a VR headset or an immersive experience is really difficult. And that pipeline is a real challenge. And streamlining that pipeline is really critical in terms of moving from proof of concept to scale, right? I mean, it sounds like the least sexy thing that we've talked about, but probably one of the most important.
It's probably the most important. In fact, I think that's the barrier to adoption. If it takes days or weeks or months to get that 3D model into an immersive experience, then you're already kind of losing traction with executives. So there's a huge cost involved in just getting the models to that state. And then the other challenge is, what do people do? What the clients were doing almost to avoid that is to basically downsample the experience to images or videos. So you're going from a very rich millimeter grade engineering model and then dropping it all the way down to pixels that if you zoom into, it's just blurry.
So I can tell you an automotive's worst nightmare is a word called decimation.
Decimation.
So decimation is effectively removing quality from a 3D model just so that it will run on a device. And that is massively negative in terms of the experience, right?
So this is kind of what the Innovation Lab has developed. We have unlocked this new ability. So we've been writing new code, new protocols that allow you to go basically directly from the engineering grade model into a VR desktop or HoloLens experience automatically, and with no loss in fidelity of the 3D information. And to deliver that at high frame rates, you have to hit 90 frames a second to have a good experience in an Oculus, at least 60 in a HoloLens. And we've sort of unlocked this ability recently.
Super transformational, super transformational. And I guess the kind of last thing I maybe wanted on our conversation was really to talk about the blueprint for success here. I know coming as a customer of this kind of technology before, that actually sometimes this feels really far away from, you're holding technology debt, these concepts of industrial metaverse seem really quite far away, but you can break this into smaller chunks, right? What's the best way to kind of get started, I guess?
Yeah, honestly, I think the best way to get started with this is if you've already invested, if you're already doing 3D modeling, you can actually start to test this today with not that expensive hardware. The Oculus, like the Quest, the Meta Quest, not an expensive piece of hardware. The 3D models, the engine that we're using here, actually it's about combining parts and pieces in new ways. Everything here you're seeing is running on top of game engine. So Unreal Game Engine is where we've sort of developed this interaction. So again, it's about you already have invested in 3D models. You've already got laptops. You might already have a low-cost headset. I think it's just about
it's unlocking the potential of your existing investments, right? And that kind of goes back to what Satya and Soraya have kind of alluded to, which is this do more with less, right? Instead of you requiring to buy new hardware to run stuff, let's unlock the potential of what we already have, and I think that's really, really quite exciting.
Exactly.
Cool. So, I think that really kind of wraps up the time that we had to kind of have a conversation. I think me and Greg could literally sit on stage for hours and talk about digital twins and metaverse and et cetera, but unfortunately time prohibits us from doing that. If you're interested in getting hands-on with elements of the industrial metaverse, we actually have a HoloLens 2 experience booth at the back. My good friend Wes is running the booth. He's waving to everyone. So if you want to have a go at the HoloLens, please do go and say hi. And if you want to kind of continue the conversation with myself and Greg, we'll be milling around the expo. We're also on stage again at 4 o'clock, I think in Connection Zone 1 with one of our MVPs, Vesa. And we're talking about what we talked about today, but from the concept of the frontline worker, the field engineer. How does this technology benefit them and transform that kind of workflow?